At 4:25 in the morning, security cameras inside a quiet Texas church recorded something that would haunt investigators for years. A figure dressed in full police tactical gear moved slowly through the darkened hallways, smashing windows and opening doors. The movements were deliberate, methodical, almost rehearsed. 40 minutes later, someone would discover why this person was really there. And what those cameras captured would become one of the most analyzed pieces of evidence in modern criminal history. Yet despite millions of views, despite countless investigative hours, despite advanced technology and forensic science, the footage would raise more questions than it answered. This is the story of Missy Bevers. And the twist at the center of this case is so unexpected, so disturbing, that even veteran homicide detectives struggled to believe what the evidence revealed. Missy Bevers was 45 years old and lived in Midlothian, Texas, a suburban community about 30 miles southwest of Dallas. She was a wife, a mother of 3 daughters, and a woman who had recently transformed her life through fitness. Missy had discovered her passion for health and wellness just a few years earlier. She had lost significant weight, gained confidence, and decided to share that journey with others. She became a fitness instructor, specializing in a program called Camp Gladiator. It was an outdoor boot camp-style workout that emphasized community, encouragement, and pushing past personal limits. By all accounts, Missy loved what she did. Her social media showed a woman full of energy and positivity. She posted motivational messages. She celebrated her clients' achievements. She documented her own fitness journey with pride. Friends described her as bubbly, outgoing, and genuinely invested in helping others reach their goals. Missy taught early morning classes, often starting before sunrise. Her dedicated clients would meet her in parks, parking lots, or in this case, inside the Creekside Church of Christ when weather was bad. The church had given permission for Camp Gladiator to use their facility. It was an arrangement built on trust and community goodwill. On the morning of April 18, 2016, Missy was scheduled to teach a 5 a.m. class. Rain was forecasted, so she had arranged to hold the session inside the church. She texted her class participants the night before, confirming the location change. Everything seemed routine. Just another early morning workout. Just another day of helping people become healthier, stronger versions of themselves. But Missy Bevers would never teach that class. Missy left her home around 4 a.m. that morning. The drive to Creekside Church took about 20 minutes. She was alone in her vehicle traveling through the dark, quiet streets of Midlothian. Her husband, Brandon, was out of town on a fishing trip in Mississippi. Her daughters were grown, living their own lives. It was just Missy, driving to do what she loved. At approximately 4:18 a.m., Missy's truck was captured on a store security camera near the church. She appeared to be driving normally. Nothing suggested she was aware of any danger. Nothing indicated she knew what was waiting for her inside that building. At 4:25 a.m., the church's internal security system recorded movement inside. Someone was already there. Someone who had broken in through a side door. Someone dressed head to toe in what appeared to be police riot gear, complete with a tactical helmet that obscured their face. For the next 23 minutes, this figure wandered through the church corridors, seemingly searching for something, or perhaps waiting for someone. At 4:35 a.m., cameras show a brief, chaotic moment of movement near the main entrance area. Then nothing. The hallways remained empty. The figure in tactical gear disappeared from view. At approximately 5 a.m., the first Camp Gladiator participant arrived at the church for the workout class. This person entered through the main doors, expecting to find Missy setting up equipment, preparing for the session. Instead, they found a scene that would change everything. Missy Bevers was lying on the floor in one of the church hallways. She was unresponsive. There was blood. The participant immediately called 911, their voice shaking with panic and confusion. What was supposed to be a morning workout had become a crime scene. First responders arrived within minutes. Paramedics attempted life-saving measures, but it was too late. Missy Bevers was pronounced dead at the scene. She had suffered multiple puncture wounds to her head and chest. The attack had been brutal, violent, and shockingly personal for what appeared to be a random encounter. Midlothian Police Department secured the church immediately. Homicide detectives were called in. The FBI would later join the investigation, because what officers discovered inside Creekside Church was unlike any crime scene they had encountered before. The killer had left evidence, lots of it, including 23 minutes of high-quality security footage showing their every movement inside the building. But that evidence, as investigators would soon learn, would create as many mysteries as it solved. When Midlothian police detectives arrived at Creekside Church, they found a crime scene that defied easy explanation. Missy Bevers had clearly been murdered. The wounds suggested a close-range attack with a handheld weapon, possibly a hammer or similar tool. But the circumstances surrounding her death were deeply puzzling. First, there was no sign of sexual assault. Second, nothing appeared to have been stolen. Missy's belongings were still with her. The church had not been robbed. This was not a burglary interrupted by an unexpected witness. The killer had not come for money or valuables. So why was someone inside that church at 4:25 in the morning? And why were they dressed in full tactical police gear? Detectives immediately requested the church's security footage. What they watched would become the most scrutinized video evidence in recent criminal investigation history. The footage showed a figure approximately 5 feet 6 inches to 5 feet 8 inches tall, moving through the church hallways with a strange, distinctive gait. The person walked with a slight limp or unusual foot movement, turning their left foot outward with each step. They carried what appeared to be a hammer or pry bar in one hand. The figure's face was completely obscured by the tactical helmet and gear. Their body shape was ambiguous. The bulky equipment made it impossible to determine gender with certainty. They moved slowly, almost casually, breaking glass in doors, opening cabinets, peering into rooms. The behavior seemed random, aimless, like someone killing time, or perhaps creating the appearance of a burglary. But forensic analysts noted something crucial. The person never looked directly at the cameras. Despite wandering through multiple hallways, despite being captured from different angles, the figure seemed aware of where the cameras were positioned and avoided giving investigators a clear view of their face or body proportions. This was not random. This was someone who had planned carefully. As the investigation progressed, detectives worked to establish a timeline. They determined that the suspect had entered the church through a side door at approximately 4:18 a.m., just minutes before Missy was captured on external cameras driving nearby. The break-in appeared opportunistic, using a tool to force open an exterior door. Once inside, the suspect wandered the building for over 20 minutes. During this time, Missy arrived at the church around 4:35 a.m. She entered through the main entrance, likely unaware that anyone else was inside. The encounter between Missy and her killer lasted less than 5 minutes. The attack was swift and brutal. Forensic investigators collected DNA evidence from the scene, including blood samples and trace materials. They examined the break-in point for tool marks and fingerprints. They documented the path the suspect had taken through the building, noting which rooms had been entered and what had been disturbed. One detail stood out. The suspect had left bloody footprints. The tactical boots captured on camera had distinctive tread patterns. If investigators could match those boots to a specific manufacturer and model, they might be able to trace purchases and narrow down suspects. But there was a problem. The boot prints were generic. The style was common, available from multiple retailers both online and in stores. Thousands of people in Texas alone owned similar footwear. Still, investigators pressed forward. They began interviewing everyone connected to Missy Bevers. Her husband, her family, her fitness clients, her co-workers, anyone who might have had a reason to wish her harm. Brandon Bevers, Missy's husband, was immediately questioned. In homicide investigations involving married women, statistically, intimate partners are often the perpetrators. Detectives needed to eliminate him as a suspect or confirm his involvement. Brandon's alibi was solid. He had been on a fishing trip in Mississippi with friends and family. Multiple witnesses confirmed his whereabouts. Cell phone records and credit card transactions placed him hundreds of miles away from Midlothian at the time of the murder. Security footage from the trip corroborated his account. Brandon was cleared. But during the investigation, detectives uncovered something that raised new questions. Missy and Brandon's marriage had not been perfect. Both had been involved in inappropriate communications with other people. Text messages and social media messages revealed emotional affairs, though there was no evidence of physical infidelity. This opened new investigative avenues. Were any of these outside relationships connected to the murder? Had jealousy or betrayal motivated someone to kill Missy? Detectives interviewed the individuals involved in these communications. They examined alibis. They looked for any connection to the person captured on the church security footage. They investigated whether anyone had hired a hitman or enlisted help to carry out the murder. One name emerged as a person of interest: a man who had been communicating with Missy. Someone who potentially had means, motive, and opportunity. Investigators obtained search warrants. They examined this person's vehicle looking for tactical gear, boots matching the crime scene prints, or any evidence linking them to the church. They found nothing conclusive. The person denied involvement. Their alibi was not perfect, but it could not be definitively broken. Forensic evidence did not match. Detectives had suspicions but not proof. Then came the first major twist that changed the direction of the entire investigation. Forensic gait analysts were brought in to examine the security footage. These specialists study the way people walk, identifying unique biomechanical signatures that can help identify individuals even when their faces are obscured. The analyst focused on the suspect's distinctive limping gait, the outward turn of the left foot, and the overall body movement patterns. The report came back with a conclusion that shocked investigators. Based on the gait analysis, the suspect was most likely female. This revelation upended the investigation. Detectives had been focusing primarily on male suspects. The tactical gear, the violent nature of the attack, and the break-in method had led investigators to assume they were looking for a man. But if the killer was actually a woman, the entire suspect pool had to be reconsidered. Police began looking at women in Missy's life: female fitness competitors, women involved in the extramarital communications, friends who might have had hidden jealousies or grudges, family members with financial motives. One person in particular drew significant attention. Detectives focused their attention on a woman who was related to someone in Missy's extended social circle. This person had a similar body build to the figure in the security footage. Forensic analysts compared her gait to the suspect's walk. There were similarities, enough to warrant deeper investigation. Police obtained search warrants for this woman's property. They searched her home, her vehicles, and her electronic devices. They interviewed her multiple times. They asked about her whereabouts on the morning of April 18th. They questioned her about any potential conflicts with Missy Bevers. The woman maintained her innocence. She provided an alibi, though parts of it were difficult to verify with absolute certainty. She denied owning tactical gear. She denied ever being inside Creekside Church. She said she had no reason to harm Missy and barely knew her. Investigators pressed hard. They analyzed her cell phone location data, looking for any indication she had been near the church that morning. They examined her financial records for purchases of tactical equipment or boots matching the crime scene prints. They interviewed neighbors, asking if anyone had seen her leaving early that morning. The community watched closely. Local and national media covered the case extensively. The security footage of the mysterious figure in tactical gear had gone viral. Millions of people watched the video, offering theories, suggestions, and speculation. Some claimed they could identify the suspect based on body language. Others pointed fingers at various individuals connected to Missy. But as weeks turned into months, investigators could not find definitive evidence linking this woman or anyone else to the murder. The case began to grow cold. Tips continued to pour in, but most led nowhere. The trail was going cold. Then, more than a year after the murder, investigators received new information that would breathe life back into the case. A forensic technology company approached Midlothian police with an offer to re-analyze the security footage using advanced artificial intelligence and biomechanical modeling. This technology had not been available when the investigation first began. It could potentially extract details from the video that human analysts had missed. The new analysis focused on several key factors. Body measurements derived from the suspect's movements, weight distribution patterns, range of motion in joints, muscle usage during walking, even subtle details like arm swing and shoulder positioning. The results were startling. The advanced analysis suggested the gait abnormality visible in the footage might not be natural. It appeared the suspect was deliberately altering their walk to mislead investigators. The outward foot turn and limping motion seemed exaggerated, inconsistent with genuine physical impairment. More importantly, when the artificial gait pattern was stripped away and the suspect's natural movement was calculated, the biomechanical profile changed significantly. The person's height estimate increased slightly. The gender determination became less certain. The entire physical profile had to be reconsidered. This meant that everyone who had been ruled out based on the original gait analysis needed to be looked at again. It also meant that the killer was even more sophisticated than initially believed. This was someone who understood forensic investigation techniques and had taken active steps to deceive experts. Detectives returned to the evidence with fresh eyes. They re-interviewed key individuals. They looked again at alibis that had seemed solid. They examined the tactical gear more carefully, researching where such equipment could be purchased and whether any local sales corresponded with the timeline. One detail that had been overlooked suddenly became significant. In the weeks before the murder, someone had conducted Google searches from a computer associated with a person in Missy's life. Those searches included terms related to Creekside Church, the layout of church buildings, early morning fitness classes, and disturbingly, how police investigate murders. The computer belonged to the father-in-law of someone Missy knew, an older man who had occasionally attended events at the church, someone who had been peripherally interviewed early in the investigation, but never seriously considered a suspect. Detectives obtained a warrant to search this man's property. What they found was concerning: tactical equipment, boots similar to those worn by the suspect, clothing that matched the color and style seen in the security footage, and most damning injuries. The man had unexplained cuts and bruises on his hands and arms, consistent with breaking glass and engaging in a physical altercation. When confronted, the man claimed the injuries were from yard work. He said the tactical gear was for personal protection and hunting. He insisted he had never been to Creekside Church on the morning of the murder. He said his computer must have been used by someone else, or perhaps he had been researching the case out of curiosity like thousands of other people in the community. His alibi was weak. He lived alone. He had no one to verify his whereabouts that morning. Cell phone location data was inconclusive, showing his phone at his residence. But that only proved his phone was there, not necessarily him. Investigators believed they had finally found their suspect. But belief is not the same as proof. The forensic evidence was examined and re-examined. DNA collected from the crime scene was compared to samples from the father-in-law. The results were not a match. His DNA was not found at the scene. Defense attorneys would later argue that the lack of DNA evidence was significant. If this man had engaged in a violent, close-range struggle with Missy Bevers, his DNA should have been present. The fact that it was not suggested he was not the killer. But prosecutors countered that the tactical gear the suspect wore would have prevented DNA transfer. The helmet, gloves, and layered clothing were designed to protect the wearer. It was entirely possible for the killer to have committed this crime without leaving biological evidence. The boot prints were analyzed. The tread pattern matched boots found at the man's residence. But again, these were common boots. Thousands of people owned identical pairs. The match proved the suspect wore that style of boot, but it did not prove the specific man wore them inside the church. The case came down to circumstantial evidence. The Google searches, the tactical gear ownership, the weak alibi, the injuries, the gait analysis that could no longer definitively rule him out, and one more detail. A witness came forward claiming to have seen a vehicle matching the description of one owned by the father-in-law near the church around the time of the murder. The witness had not reported this initially because they were not certain of the timing. But when shown photographs, They confirmed it was the same make and model. It was not conclusive. It was not a smoking gun, but it was enough for prosecutors to believe they had a case. In October 2019, more than 3 years after Missy Bevers was murdered, police arrested Randy Bevers' father, whose name has been withheld by authorities due to ongoing legal proceedings. He was charged with capital murder. The arrest shocked the community. Many people had suspected various individuals over the years, but this man had never been a major focus of public speculation. He was elderly, seemingly harmless, a grandfather. The idea that he could have dressed in tactical gear, broken into a church, and violently murdered a woman seemed almost incomprehensible. During interrogation, the man maintained his innocence. He refused to confess. He insisted that investigators had made a terrible mistake. His attorney argued that the evidence was entirely circumstantial, that there was no direct proof of his involvement, and that the prosecution's case was built on speculation and coincidence. The legal proceedings were delayed multiple times. COVID-19 pandemic restrictions slowed the court system. Defense attorneys filed numerous motions challenging the admissibility of evidence. The gait analysis, the Google search history, and the witness testimony were all contested. As of the date of this script, the case has not yet gone to trial. The suspect remains in custody, awaiting his day in court. Legal experts believe the trial, when it finally happens, will hinge on whether the jury finds the circumstantial evidence compelling enough to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. Prosecutors will argue that the totality of the evidence points to this man. The searches, the gear, the injuries, the lack of a solid alibi, the witness who saw his vehicle. They will present the security footage and ask the jury to compare the suspect's movements to this man's gait and body type. Defense attorneys will counter that none of this evidence directly places their client inside that church. No DNA, no fingerprints, no confession, no murder weapon recovered. They will argue that the investigation focused on their client only after other leads failed, and that police are trying to force evidence to fit a conclusion rather than following evidence to a suspect. The jury will have to decide, and that decision may ultimately come down to whether 12 people believe the figure in that tactical gear, captured on 23 minutes of security footage, matches the man sitting in the courtroom. Missy Bevers' family has waited years for justice. Her husband, Brandon, has spoken publicly about the pain of losing his wife and the frustration of watching years pass without answers. Her daughters have grown up without their mother, forever changed by violence that seemed to come from nowhere. The Midlothian community was shaken by this crime. Creekside Church, once a place of worship and community gathering, became forever associated with tragedy. The early morning fitness class Missy was scheduled to teach that day never happened. Camp Gladiator continued in her memory, but the joy and energy she brought to those sessions could never be replaced. If the suspect is convicted, he faces life in prison or potentially the death penalty. Texas law allows for capital punishment in murder cases involving certain aggravating factors. Prosecutors have not yet announced whether they will seek the death penalty, but regardless of the legal outcome, one truth remains. Missy Bevers is gone. A woman who dedicated herself to helping others, who inspired people to become healthier and stronger, who loved her family and her work, was taken in a moment of senseless violence. The case of Missy Bevers demonstrates something profound about modern criminal investigations. Even with security cameras, even with advanced forensic technology, even with DNA analysis and artificial intelligence, some cases remain maddeningly difficult to solve. The killer in this case was prepared. They disguised themselves extensively. They appeared to alter their gait deliberately. They avoided leaving biological evidence. They created a crime scene that looked like a burglary, but was almost certainly a targeted murder. Yet in the end, it may have been the small details that led to their identification. Google searches, ownership of tactical gear, injuries, a witness sighting, not a single smoking gun but rather a collection of facts that, when assembled together, tell a story. This case also highlights the dedication of investigators who refused to give up. For more than 3 years, detectives pursued leads, re-examined evidence, and searched for answers. The arrest, when it finally came, was the result of persistence and methodical police work. As this case moves toward trial, the world will be watching. The security footage that millions have analyzed will be presented in court. Expert witnesses will testify about gait patterns, forensic evidence, and digital footprints. And ultimately, a jury will decide whether justice has been served. If this investigation taught us anything, it is that the truth, no matter how well hidden, can eventually be uncovered. That detectives who refuse to close unsolved cases can make breakthroughs even years later. And that those who take lives, no matter how carefully they plan, often leave behind traces that will eventually lead back to them. If you found this investigation compelling, leave your thoughts in the comments below. What detail in this case stood out to you most? And subscribe for more true crime documentaries that explore the unexpected twists and dedicated investigative work that brings killers to justice. The case of Missy Bevers is not yet closed, but the search for truth continues, and for her family, for her community, and for everyone who believes in accountability, that search will not end until justice is finally, definitively served.